What's going on, everybody? It's Jack, and in today's video I want to share the top 5 things I wish I knew before I started working out. When I first started working out, I was about 135 pounds, skinny fat, not much muscle, not very strong, and had no idea what I was doing in the gym. And then over the next 4 to 5 years, through a lot of trial, error, learning, mistakes, I was able to build a physique that I'm proud of at 175 pounds with a decent amount of muscle and a fairly lean physique. And in this video, I want to share my biggest mistakes that hopefully you can avoid on your fitness journey. The first thing I wish I knew before I started working out was to leave my ego at the door. You've probably heard that term before, but essentially what it means is don't worry about how much weight you're moving in the gym, don't worry about how much the person next to you is lifting, and don't worry about comparing yourself to someone on Instagram or on YouTube and seeing how much they're lifting and how much you think you should be. Instead, focus on your form. Make sure you have full range of motion and can control whatever weight you decide to work with throughout the entire range of motion. Use me for example. When I first started, I thought I needed to have a heavy back squat in order to grow my legs and impress everyone in the gym. I remember my squat, hopefully I can find a video of this, my squat was atrocious. I was squatting only like 260 pounds maybe with terrible form. I thought as long as you squat down and squat up, you're good to go in the weight count. But my form was atrocious. I was doing a good morning, my hips were firing up way too fast, my knees weren't over my toes. There's a lot going on wrong in that squat. But over time, I realized I need to kind of cut back on the weight, work on my form, and eventually I built up to a 405 pound squat. So it takes time, but one of the biggest things is, as far as form goes, focus on form, technique, and execution before you start adding weight to anything. Another big thing about focusing on form is you won't injure yourself. Someone who maybe makes progressions over time a little bit faster than you, but is sacrificing form, might get injured. So if we had a graph and we saw how quickly someone progressed with poor form and then they had a little decrease when they got injured versus someone who has good form consistently and never gets injured, the person that doesn't get injured and can train longer and harder is gonna make more progress than someone that trains improperly with a lot of intensity and gets injured. So that's another big thing. As far as leaving your ego at the door, you prevent yourself from getting injured so you can train longer and harder, which in the long run is be best for your results. And this leads me into lesson number 2 I wish I knew before I started going to the gym, is to train smart. So although we want to train with good form and good technique in the gym, that's every rep and set. But as far as the grand scheme of training, we want to make sure that we are achieving progressive overload and training smart and hard. So as far as training smart, we want to make sure that we're following a structured program. When I first started lifting, I would just go in the gym. If it was chest day, I'd bench, I'd do some cable flies, maybe a little bit incline work, and then I'd do some shoulders if it was a push day. And then on my back day, I'd do some pull-ups, maybe a row. I had no method to my madness. I would just go to the gym and work out whatever body part I thought I needed to train that day. But this style of training was not optimal at all. I was not tracking my sets, I was not tracking my reps, I was vaguely tracking my weight, but had no real progression. I would just go to the gym, do 3 to 4 sets of each exercise, maybe 8 to 20 reps, not tracking anything, just kind of winging it. But then I realized I need to optimize my time in the gym, and the way to do that is following a program. Personally, I started off just like you guys are now, watch a YouTube video, learning from guys like Jeff Nippert, Scott Herman, eventually put together my own program, and over a lot of time, trials, being certified as a personal trainer, I've got to the point where I now feel comfortable writing my own programs, but I highly recommend going and finding a program for you to follow. As far as progressive overload, essentially what that means is we want to make sure that over time, we're getting stronger or pushing more weight. A lot of times people think progressive overload is only adding weight onto the bar, but there's actually a lot of different ways you can progressively overload, whether that be the number of sets you're doing, the overall reps, so that's example volumes, as well as the weight you have on the bar. But you can also use progressive overload through tempo sets. You can do pause squats, you can do pause bench, you can increase the RPE. So if something's really, really hard at first and it gets easier over time, that's gonna be a form of progressive overload, but you didn't add any sets, reps, or weight. And the last thing you can do is have better form or full range of motion. Those are all forms of progressive overload that you should make note of in your program and make sure that on a weekly and monthly basis, you're progressing in those areas. A key to making sure you're progressing in the gym is to make sure that you're fueling yourself outside the gym, which takes me to point number 3, which is to make sure that your food and fuel match up with your goals. So one thing that I remember when I first started out, I didn't track calories, macros, anything. I just ate pretty much whatever I wanted to at any point. I got the Doritos at lunch when I wanted to. I got the appetizer and the dessert at dinner. I had no idea what I was putting in my body, and no wonder I was skinny fat at 135 pounds. I was not tracking anything. And then I started to track my calories and protein a little bit. And that was the first step I made to try to increase the results I was getting in the gym. And I slowly realized that although I might track my calories and protein, the quality of the food itself is just as important as the amount. So I started going to more of a whole food diet, and I saw changes almost immediately. I lost a lot of water weight, I was feeling more energized, and my training was through the roof. The biggest thing here is your food is your fuel. So at its core, eating whole foods is gonna be what's best for your body. And then if you wanna get a little bit more in detail, I would say track your calories and protein. And you can also get even more detail by tracking your carbs, protein, and fats, or your macronutrients. Then you can make sure you're in a calorie surplus or calorie deficit for your specific goals. Food also plays a giant role in how we recover and grow outside the gym. And that leads me onto lesson number 4, which is don't undervalue recovery. Recovery is so important for building muscle, especially as a natural athlete. I remember when I first started out, I thought the more I work out, the more results I get. And honestly, that could probably not be farther from the truth for a natural athlete, especially someone like myself who's training 7 days a week, doing cardio after every workout, thinking I need to do abs every single day, and doing 8 or 9 exercises per muscle group per workout. I was just overdoing it. I was your classic overtrainer. Slowly I realized that this was actually hindering my recovery process, and I was going to the gym not feeling fresh, and that my workouts were actually slacking because I was not giving myself adequate time to recover. And a few recovery tips I have are: 1, probably trim down the amount of volume you're doing in the gym. If you're trying to progressive overload and you feel like a hamster on a wheel and you're just running in place, not being able to make any progress, I would say take a look at your volume and probably cut it back. Personally, I like to have most of my clients on a 3 to 4 day split, a 3-day split being full body and a 4-day split being upper lower. If you are an advanced trainee, I definitely think you can benefit from a 5-day split, but not nearly as much as someone who trains 2 days a week to 4 days a week. That change from 2 days per week to 4 days per week is pretty significant, as you can start to hit each muscle group in an adequate volume 2 times per week. I would say 5 days can be beneficial if you have a specific lagging muscle group. On that 5th day, you can target that muscle group. As far as recovery as a whole, sleep is probably the most important thing. Definitely want to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I highly recommend a sleep routine or something to help you fall asleep at night. Don't have your phone out, read a book, whatever it is you need to get to sleep on time. As well as on your off days, or if you're not training every day, active recovery is better than just sitting and being a couch potato. Instead of being a couch potato, get out, go for a walk, a light jog, bike ride, hiking, whatever it is. You don't need to be in the gym, but something to keep the blood flowing and stimulate that muscle recovery is ideal. And if you do feel like you're overtraining, decrease your volume or even take some time off and then start back at a lower volume that you can then build from, so you know that over time you're making progress. And that leads me into lesson number 5 I wish I knew before I started working out, which is also the most important in my opinion, because without lesson 5, the other 4 don't matter. It's that it's gonna take time. Time and consistency is going to equal results. If we can take anything away from this video, just realize that nothing happens overnight. You don't get fat overnight, you don't get fit overnight. It's gonna be a process. Doing 1 through 4 or having steps 1 through 4 set up for 1 month straight, in the long term, that's not really gonna do much. It's gonna take time, 3, 6, 12 months. And at the end of the day, this fitness journey, it's gonna last a lifetime. We wanna be healthy for our entire lives. My biggest thing is I never wanna have to say no because of my physical health. If it's to go play with my kids one day, or be a coach, or play basketball with my friends, or go golfing, I never want to have to say no because I physically can't do something. So I realized that this is going to be a lifelong journey for me. It's not, oh, in 12 months I can go back to eating chips and not training and not worrying about my health. That it's going to be an ongoing game, and that it takes time, and that 1 month in the grand scheme of things is not very long. We make sure whatever we implement into our lives is something sustainable, so we can do it long term, and that we enjoy it, and the longer we do it, the better results we're gonna have. One thing that I can personally speak on is the time at the beginning when you first get into lifting. I would recommend staying in a surplus. The big thing that I really regret was doing the bulk and cut cycles again and again. I was in college, so I really want to be lean for spring break and summer, but that would only give me 6 months in the wintertime to be in a surplus, and I'd immediately cut again. And I will say, I was making some progress throughout those cut and bulk cycles, but I would have benefited a lot more if I had stuck to a surplus and just focused on making progress in the gym for 2 to 3 years rather than doing the cut and bulk cycle. And that's why this summer I've committed to a bulk. I've never done a bulk for an entire summer before. I actually would probably be my leanest I ever am now, and I'm actually currently just about in the middle of my bulk and still about 12 months left. But this summer I'm investing in my future self. Before, I was always thinking the next 6 months, the next 3 months. How lean do I want to be? Do I want to bulk up? And now I'm investing in my future self and giving myself time to build muscle in a surplus, and realizing that it's going to be some delayed gratification. I'm not going to look my best this summer, but I'm going to build so much muscle and density this summer that I'll be able to carry that for the rest of my life. And I didn't realize that the muscle building process is the longest and probably hardest thing to do. As far as losing weight or losing fat, I would say relative to building muscle, it's a little bit simpler, whereas building muscle, you need to have a lot of things as far as your nutrients, the training, your form, rest, recovery, all that kind of stuff dialed in. and you're still not gonna build a ton of muscle. It takes a lot of time. So I've decided to dedicate this summer to building muscle. But I wrap up the video here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys can learn a thing or two from my mistakes and things I wish I knew before I started training, so you don't make the same mistakes I did. If you are looking for a little bit more personalized programming for you, I do offer one-on-one coaching, which will be down in the description. Otherwise, I do have a lot of other free information on my channel in my fitness tips playlist, as well as a lot of full days of eating if you guys need any ideas or need some meal ideas, that kind of thing. So be sure to check those out. Anyways, I'll end the video here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.